All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here as always with Tom Orr. Kevin Noon will be here in a bit. He's currently on a radio hit. Uh, Tom, this has been an amazing day. First off, how's it going?
Tony, 20 minutes ago, we had no plans to do a live show today. We had already recorded a show that was going to drop later today. Don't worry, I've already pushed that one back till tomorrow, so you will have to wait to hear about the TV broadcast schedule till tomorrow. Tony, boy, some stuff has happened in college football over the last 24 hours or so, and a whole bunch more happened about half an hour ago. And oh boy, it is getting spicy down south.
This is, I tweeted, this is the greatest day in college football history to see. First off, last night was crazy. Nick Saban goes after Jimbo Fisher by mentioning NIL and that Texas A&M has bought all of their players. And so we were all just waiting. What's Jimbo Fisher going to do? And then about, I don't know, 9:15 this morning, the email went out that Jimbo was going to have a presser. And so we just got done watching that, and that was the most amazing press conference I have ever seen because he lit into Nick Saban unlike any coach has ever done to any other coach. It was, first of all, it was the most honest thing I think maybe we've ever seen from a coach. However, it wasn't entirely factual, and we can get into some of that stuff where because Jimbo talked about like this, none of this was illegal, and to say that it was illegal, and I don't recall Nick Saban ever saying any of it was illegal. It's just Nick Saban. I don't even think he said anything about rules being broken necessarily, but please don't let that stop Jimbo Fisher from going off and giving us the best press conference rant of all time. And it was interesting. People would try to ask the next question. He would have to go back to his original answer. He's like, I'm not done yet. I'm going to go further into what I think of Nick Saban. And there was quote after quote where it was just like, this is amazing. And then he would top it. And this is amazing. And it was all awesome. And Tom, I don't know whether I wish I covered Texas A&M or I'm glad I don't at this moment in Alabama because this is a bombshell.
Yeah, it is a bombshell. And I think before we get into today, we should probably get a little bit of backstory on these guys. There's a history between them for quite a while. Jimbo was obviously at Florida State before he went to Texas A&M. Saban has been at Alabama since 2007. But they have overlapped. They have been recruiting in the same areas. They have been clashing in recruiting for a decade or more at this point. You may remember last summer, Jimbo Fisher was in front of a booster club and got up and said, "We're going to kick their ass this year," talking about Alabama. And then there was a great clip of Nick Saban being asked about this at some random event he was at, some event like the one he was at last night. And a TV reporter just said, "Hey, did you hear what Jimbo Fisher said?" And Nick obviously had not. And he said, "No, I didn't hear it." He said, "Well, he said they're going to kick your ass this year." And Saban pauses and smiles and looks at the guy and says, "In golf?" And, and the real funny part of that is then, of course, Texas A&M beat Alabama last year. So, there is some heat there. There is some, there is some angst there between those two guys for a while already. That was a little bit more. It seemed a little good natured, but it was one of those like, a couple guys are kind of giving each other crap. And it's like, it feels like there's a little something more going on behind the scenes here. Like that was sort of how that tracked back then. And that is definitely how that tracks right now.
Well, and Nick Saban this week had talked about the way NIL was impacting parity, and that he was upset about that, and the damage that it could do to uh, the ability of the opportunity for everyone to win. And he was getting a lot of grief for invoking parity when he is Nick Saban, and the last thing Alabama wants is parity. And what is going on with Texas A&M, clearly he feels like a threat, and so he has now spoken out. And then just reading through some of these quotes because Obviously we watched it live, and it was so fast and furious. Like you can't keep up with every nugget that he just threw down and every insult and everything like that. So I'll just go through a couple here, saying we never bought anybody, no rules are broken, nothing was done wrong. Like for one, you can buy people and not have rules broken. Like
Mhm.
there's some
Mhm.
plausible deniability in a lot of what Jimbo Fisher said. And then when somebody else asked him, like, so you're saying, the NIL stuff, he's like, I don't know about the NIL. I don't, you know, like he just
What's
completely
a
stays out of
moida?
it. Exactly. And he also said the one thing I you can't call me a cheater and I don't lie. And when coaches are that definitive, they're asking people to try to find out. And sometimes it goes poorly, like with Hugh Freeze.
Mhm.
And, we'll see what happens here. But he was also saying the same thing of Nick Saban because how many times did he talk about the way without saying that Nick Saban cheats, but all of the different ways he danced around it. And it was a very easily interpreted dance.
Yeah, it was, and you can pull up the quote where people think he's God, and you don't want to
Mhm.
dig into how God is doing his business. Basically, I mean, you can pull the exact quote for me, but yeah, it was. At one point, I just tweeted a screenshot of one of my favorite tweets of all time, which was Hugh Freeze on February 1st, 2013, 5:34 p.m. I believe that was National Signing Day. At Coach Hugh Freeze, if you have facts about a violation, send it to compliance@olemiss.edu. If not, please do not slander these young men or insult their family. Tony, same energy or different energy from Hugh Freeze? Because it was like, boy, or from Jimbo Fisher on Thursday, because it was like, boy, it felt like there was a tremendous amount of overlap there in content, in attitude, approach, whatever you want to call it. It was just like, oh boy, I have seen this before, and it didn't go great for the last guy, but maybe it'll go great for him. But in general, just if you've got two guys at this level hurling stuff back and forth, there's one of two ways this goes from here. One is Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, steps in and says, look, everyone put your guns down. Let's take two deep breaths and not say anything we can't take back. And we'll see if stuff has been said that people can't take back. But they would, I mean, the Texas A&M and Alabama programs generally would probably be better off with everyone putting their guns down and taking two steps back. Because the other way this ends is, Tony, are you familiar with the Southwest Conference in the 1980s? When everyone was accusing each other of cheating and everyone ended up on probation and SMU got the death penalty. It's like, yeah, there's probably, I don't want to accuse anyone of anything specific, but there has probably been there has been some gray area explored, I would assume, in the area of NIL in Tuscaloosa and or College Station over the last 12 to 24 months. I think that's probably, there's been at least a little gray area curiosity in one or both of those places in the field of NIL over the last 12 to 24 months. I think that's
Well,
probably not an outrageous thing to say, right?
right. And so much of it is just a redneck standoff. But now the guns are starting to be fired. The God quote, this is Jimbo Fisher on Nick Saban. Some people think they're God. Go dig into how God did his deal. You may find out about a guy that did a lot of things you don't want to know.
Does he
This is
mean? Does he
gold.
mean? Does he mean Genesis chapter 1? Is that what he's talking about, or is there someone else he's talking about whose name is not literally God? I'm confused.
In the beginning, there was a bagman,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and he said, "Let there be cash," and lo, there was cash. He calls Nick Saban a narcissist. Like he came out swinging. This is like putting a cleanup hitter batting lead off and just jacking him out of the yard like 9 straight solo home runs. And uh, the I'm just scrolling through these because they're all. It was so amazing. Now we have Kevin.
Speaking of
Kevin.
narcissists, Kevin Noon is here. Hey, Kevin, everybody.
Hey, what's up?
So what were your major takeaways? Is this the greatest thing you've ever seen, or what?
It puts a lot of these other dust ups we've seen through the years kind of to shame. I just did a radio interview where they kind of brought up the Ryan Day hang 100 on him comments. He's like, this isn't even in the same ballpark. I said, this isn't even in the same state. I mean, this is nobody was calling anybody a god, and where is your God now, Moses, or any. I mean, this was. I'm still tingly from just the confrontation, because I love confrontation, except for when it involves me, and I have nothing to do with this. So this is perfect.
This is
Well,
great. We're
and
doing a little vacation Bible school thing here. We started in Genesis. Now Kevin's got us in Exodus. All right, Tony, Leviticus. Thoughts?
no. Let's not beget all of these other things that could beget and beget and beget. The Jimbo was asked, so are you like, isn't it going to be uncomfortable at the SEC meetings this spring? And Jim was like, why? Well, because like you're going to be there with them and you said all these bad things. And Jim was like, I like confrontation. It's like, oh, this is going to be good. This needs to be on television. And, we've seen the influx of celebrity boxing. It's big now. Maybe we can get these two guys in the ring. Kevin, would you, because I said I don't know if I would want to have been on either of these beats right now, Alabama and Texas A&M. For one, it's a dream to have something like this, but it's also a lot of work. Like, now that work may be easy in terms of, this thing writes itself or whatever, and the content creates itself. But it's like the middle of May. Do you really want to be having to do all of this right now if you're covering Texas A&M or Alabama? Would you like to be on one of those beats right now where something like this happens, or do you need a break during the summer?
I would much rather be writing these pieces than the top 12 funny names of the SEC pieces, right? I mean, this is red meat. This is guaranteed views. This is guaranteed clicks. This is the stuff that I live for. Because the truth of the matter is that I think that the people that are dyed in the wool Alabama certainly are going to have their view of this. I think the people that are dyed in the wool Texas A&M are going to have their view of this, and then everybody else out there has their own opinion. And whether or not it gravitates to one or the other, this is I'm sure that everybody's phone is blowing up down there that covers these teams to get on every national show out there. Maybe a little bit of pacing. I don't need all of this happening just all at once. But when I woke up and went out and did a couple chores, then I looked at my phone. It's like Texas A&M has called a press conference. I'm like, and here we go.
And there was someone who was asking what happened. They missed it. And I mean, this all started on Wednesday night when Nick Saban was at an event with boosters in Birmingham. He said, quote, A&M bought every player on their team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness. We didn't buy one player, but I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in the future because more and more people are doing it. Texas A&M head coach Jimbo Fisher, as Kevin said, scheduled a press conference for Thursday. Tony, you said you had some of the quotes up. Go ahead and just pick one at random, and really literally pick any sentence at random because they were all about a 12 out of 10.
Yeah, well, and here's just a simple one. Somebody asked, have you talked to Nick since? And Jimbo was like, he called. And so he didn't answer his call. And I'm like, no, we're done. And he's like, this is just like, that's it. We are broken up. And it's not like they were friends anyway, for a while. But when you're calling another coach, or at least what he's doing, despicable, like, these are things that there's no gray area there now. And then you can't walk this back. Like, Nick Saban basically said Texas, and what my suggestion was, Jimbo Fisher just come out and say, yeah, Nick Saban said we utilize NIL very well for our players and the benefit of their families. But Jimbo just came out and, for one, like, we didn't buy anybody. We didn't do anything illegal, and I don't recall Nick Saban saying anything about illegal stuff. But I'm just the offense that Jimbo. There's no defense here. This is all offense, and he starts to. The nice touch was apologizing to the Texas A&M fans who have been besmirched by Nick Saban, apologizing to his own players who have been besmirched by Nick Saban, I thought while not everything he said was factual, I thought it was fantastic. And you're right. Like the the unfortunate thing is I've just got to search up here for Jimbo Fisher and God. So those are the only quotes I have like in front of me. But I don't cheat, I don't lie. If you did, my old man slapped me across the face. Maybe someone should have slapped him. And when one coach says another coach should be slapped, that's just it doesn't. In this age of TMZ, it just doesn't get any better than that.
Kevin, you want to do the super chat?
Yeah, exactly. We've got a super chat from Jordan Kapler. I have a feeling Tennessee is sitting there watching this, holding their greasy McDonald's bag, feeling left out. And for those that don't recognize the McDonald's reference, we all talk about the bag, the money bag, and there were allegations that it was a McDonald's bag where some of the payouts were for Tennessee. I can't sit there and say if it's true or not. I'm not here for that. I'm not here to judge. I'm absolutely here for judgment. But I agree with Jordan that it just means more. Just means it costs more, and that's kind of been the SEC motto.
So and last night there was a thread on our board where people were talking about, do you believe Nick Saban that Texas A&M is doing more than Alabama is? Because, Alabama has not had the purest NCAA infraction history of any program in the nation. That all or most predates Saban, and you can probably draw your own conclusions as to why Mike DuBose might have had more issues bringing in talent than Nick Saban does, because one of them is Nick Saban and the other is literally Mike DuBose. But you have, I think that ties the Tennessee thing in here, where I am a lot more willing to accept that Alabama probably has not had to push as many limits in recruiting in NIL as other programs like Tennessee might have, because what can Alabama sell to recruits that Tennessee can't? NFL, development, championships. I mean, you can go to Alabama for lots of reasons other than immediate payoff, because Alabama can point to, there is a reason that these programs put out these graphics with, Justin Fields sitting on an enormous pile of money in front of a bank safe when he signs his contract with the Bears. Like, it's not the most subtle thing in the world, but, 17-year-old guys are not always the quickest to pick up on things sometimes. So sometimes subtlety is not an art here. But if you're Alabama, go through the programs that have people getting picked in the top 5, top 10 every single year. Alabama, Ohio State, maybe Georgia. The programs that are churning out talent and churning out top draft picks every year, they have a lot of stuff to sell that is not, here is a bag with a dollar sign on it. And if you are not a program that has that to sell, then maybe you're pushing boundaries a little more. And this has been a very, Wild West is like the most cliched thing. And I feel like we just okay, we can tick the box. We've now said the phrase Wild West on a show about the NIL. So now we don't have to do that again. We have met our contractual obligation. But the fact that the NCAA completely abdicated its responsibility in this area and just sort of threw its hands up and went, well, fine, if you guys want to do it, you figure it out. And so everyone has just kind of been figuring it out for the last year. And there are programs, I think, that have probably been pushing boundaries a little more than others in this area. And now the NCAA is maybe trying to pull back on it. And but I am, you look at Alabama's draft history, you look at Alabama's championship history, and then you look at Texas A&M. I am not willing to say, out of hand, Alabama is doing everything, is pushing every bit as many boundaries as Texas A&M, because I don't know that they need to. I think if you are a Texas A&M, if you are a Tennessee, if you are some of those other schools that are Texas, rather famously, pretty crappy at developing football players for the NFL and not winning a whole lot of championships. This is facts only, as the kids say. The schools where you're seeing that right now, USC, you're hearing about a lot of money getting splashed around. And, you can chalk however many of those rumors up to, you can believe as many of those as you do or don't want to. I don't personally believe that Jordan Addison is anywhere in the $3 million range, but that's neither here nor there. The schools where you're hearing the big money amounts are the schools where you don't have the other stuff necessarily to sell. There is a reason that Ole Miss was this school 10 years ago. It's because what does Ole Miss have to sell? They don't have the NFL draft track record prior to Robert Nkemdiche and Laramie Tunsil and those guys. When they were bringing those guys in, they had to sell something else. It feels like this is kind of, it's an old story in a little bit of a new wrapping right now to me.
Well, I think this is an opportunity. This is schools trying to jumpstart themselves, and it's Jimbo Fisher trying to jumpstart Texas A&M. Tennessee's trying to jumpstart, and you can do it. And so that's why Jimbo Fisher can say very much some of the same stuff as Hugh Freeze, or at least in the same tone, because now they can do it legally. And it was interesting to me. And Nick Saban said that last night, talking about his players, how 25 players had cashed in on NIL at Alabama. And it's like, my thought was, why only 25? And I'm sure Jimbo Fisher or somebody else could say because most of the players don't need extra money because they're already getting it from somewhere else under the table there at Alabama. I saw a tweet from Leon O'Neal Jr., former defensive back at Texas A&M, who said when he visited Alabama, like they all had these certain kind of cars, nice cars, and he was, he has like a Nissan Maxima or something at Texas A&M. So like I always say, Tom and Kevin, when you point a finger at somebody, you got three fingers pointing back, and I'm the only person that's ever said that. But I think there's a lot of it's just interesting to me that only 25 players took advantage of the NIL. I do also want to throw in another quote from Jimbo Fisher. We've never had parity, especially when some people never followed the rules to begin with.
I got a lot of things I want to jump in with. I don't, we talked about Tennessee and what they have to offer. They have to offer the World's Fair and the Wig Sphere for those that watch The Simpsons. Yeah. You guys may have mentioned this while I was off the show, that just to make sure everybody knows that all of Nick Saban's comments were delivered at a booster fundraiser, $1,000, $5,000 a plate. It was basically a rallying cry of we need to do this a little bit more. And then my third point too is, didn't we hear, right in the very beginning of legal NIL or whatever, how Bryce Young had signed $1 million deal or whatever, already had $1 million worth of commitments toward his NIL. So, there's a lot of layers here to examine, a lot of future shows coming on this. I think we know what the next Big Me kickoff is going to be about as well. But the funny thing is that we're seeing a lot of other recruits that have been recruited by Alabama coming out onto social and kind of talking about how the sausage is made. And you certainly have opened yourself up for plenty of criticism. And I think now with Jimbo Fisher coming back and counterpunching, that A&M is going to be open too for a lot of extra scrutiny. So all of this, this is the Jelly of the Month Club. This is the gift that keeps on giving, because we're going to have plenty of stuff coming out over the next couple of weeks. And you know what? I know that we're on the Big Ten beat, but I am putting in to go down to Destin for SEC, for the SEC media days or the coaches, whatever, because inject this stuff right into my veins.
You need to, next time, you need to coordinate the Southern Swing with the SEC meetings, and then just, kill two birds with one stone there. I wrote last week that if coaches are upset about this, they need to start naming names. And it's just good to know that Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban both read what I write and take my words to heart. I also wrote many, many years ago that after Brett Bielema left and he was gone for a couple of years, that the Big Ten needs a new Brett Bielema. You need somebody who will call people out. And Brett Bielema used to call Jim Tressel out. He's called Urban Meyer out. And yes, he would backtrack, and Barry Alvarez would have to apologize for him. But it was good to have that kind of drama. It's fun in the off season while we're just counting the days until stupid summer is over with, so we can get to fall, and to have and that's why college football, you never know what's going to happen. We always talk about these being like the dog days, and you're trying to find content. Just so often though that the content ends up finding everybody because of stuff like this. And we just wait for Nick Saban's response. Like, what time is his press conference? Will it be tomorrow? Will it be today? He has to respond in
Mhm.
some form because he just got destroyed and he had accusations made against him. So he can't just, maybe he can. He's Nick Saban. He can do whatever he wants. But I think people are expecting a response now.
You would think. I mean, Jimbo Fisher has kind of set the bar for, okay, 12 hours or later, 12 hours or less, you are on the clock. I, I think that the one thing that might prevent that from happening is what I was talking about before, where Greg Sankey gets in the phone and says, "Look, you morons," knocks their heads together like the Three Stooges, and just says, "Look, shut up. You're not, you guys getting in a fist fight over this is not going to help either of you, and it's not going to help the league." Greg Sankey, I think, has a reputation in college football for being kind of a big picture thinker. I think he gets a lot of credit for how he handled the pandemic in 2020 and kind of positioning the SEC for success there. He's the one who brought in Texas and Oklahoma. I think he's got a decent grasp. He's not Mike Slive yet, but I think he's the only Power Five commissioner who's been on the job more than like a year and a half, 2 years, something like this at that point. So, I mean, he has a little bit of seniority there. I think he's got a better big picture sense. He may be kind of smoothing things out to whatever degree he can smooth things out behind the scenes. That does not mean that, I'm right there with you, Kevin. SEC Media Days is going to be must-see TV this year. I'm still kind of also waiting for Lane Kiffin to weigh in. Lane Kiffin was on Twitter a little bit last night.
He was
I
this
have
morning too.
I have not checked his account since the Jimbo thing, but I mean, you're gonna have people who just want to sort of sit there and stir the pot too, which is always fantastic. But it is realistically for those programs, both of those programs and the league, I'm sure it is. Everyone sort of recognizes that it is in everyone's best interest to lower your guns and back away slowly. I just, there is no guarantee that Nick Saban may not give a crap what Greg Sankey says. Like everyone there has to give a crap what Greg Sankey says, but Nick Saban's kind of in a different class in terms of the sport and his role in it. So he may not care as much as Eli Drinkwitz or someone like that might have to care. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens next, because if Saban does come out and have another press, have some kind of a press conference or address it in some form, like, oh boy, like this is you're moving the doomsday clock like a couple minutes closer to midnight in terms of the SEC, the whole SEC really. If the next time that Nick Saban comes out, that's okay. There's missiles in Cuba. Okay, now what? That is potentially, Nick Saban's response to this is going to have or non-response to this is going to have a very, very big impact on just how big the blast radius on this is.
I bring up this question or this comment from Amy1116, who's a UGA fan, saying that this will tarnish Saban's legacy. It's all coming out, and it'll be interesting. I mean, the guy has all the titles and all the success and an impressive coaching tree, but if this comes out and somebody has receipts, what does this mean for the legacy? What do you guys think?
Well, and it's such an odd thing because college coaches protect each other. And what I wrote last week was, this isn't the mafia. There's no omerta, but there has been, and they have, because they all have their own skeletons. Basically, like I won't point the finger at you as long as you don't point the finger at me. And there's this honor among thieves kind of thing that not everybody's thieves, but they all work in thievery. And I mean, this is all the college football realm that they operate in, and so that's why this is so strange, because this never happens. And so will it tarnish his legacy? I don't think so, especially when he's going to go out and poor Texas A&M this year. Who knows what Alabama is going to do to them this year for this one. No, I don't think it will tarnish his legacy, because I think this isn't new information. It's just somebody new saying it.
Yes. Coach was successful in the SEC to a national championship level. That is not the correlation between that and person who is squeaky clean, not pushing any limits whatsoever, not pushing any boundaries in any area. Those are pretty much mutually exclusive things. You have to get to a certain point, I mean, realistically, if everyone else is cheating, it is almost impossible for you to keep up with everyone else who's cheating without at least pushing some boundaries. And I think there is sort of a culture within college football that has developed over the last 10 years within college football fandom, within college football media. Just look at how, the conversation around players getting paid has changed, even before NIL. 12 years ago, Terrell Pryor and Boom Herron and all of those guys, DeVere Posey, Solomon Thomas, all those guys, that was those guys were pariahs. This was terrible. This was the biggest scandal in the history of college football. And oh my goodness! And they took their memorabilia, Tony. They took their memorabilia, things that were theirs, and they exchanged those goods for money, which then they exchanged for services. Tony, I mean, biggest scandal in United States history, it's impossible to say. And then, what was it, 4 years later? I feel like the turning point was that do you remember the Todd Gurley case? Where Todd Gurley, there was a memorabilia dealer who I think was a Florida fan, and Todd Gurley was a running back for Georgia. And the memorabilia dealer didn't get the deal he wanted to with Todd Gurley, or Todd Gurley did, Todd Gurley, I think, signed autographs for someone else and then devalued the autographs he had signed for this guy or whatever it was. And so the guy, went to the media and said, "Oh boy, this college athlete has exchanged his signature for cash, American cash. Can you believe the scandal?" And everyone kind of went, I mean, I'm not sure the player is the bad guy here. And that felt like that was kind of one of the turning points there. But it's just the conversation around this whole thing has changed, where it's just like, yeah, some of these rules were just stupid, so maybe we shouldn't be worrying about them. And I think sport wide, you've sort of seen that, where there's been a little bit more willingness to push things and push boundaries and that kind of stuff. I think it would be very difficult for you to go through the players' parking lot at any Power 5 school and not go, that's a pretty nice car. And I think that's true. Literally any Power 5 school. I think that's true. Boy, that kid's got a pretty decent apartment. That's a nicer apartment than I had in college. And honestly, I don't think I see a problem there. Like there's enough money being generated by these players that, like, yeah, them getting a little something is not the biggest problem. But just culturally, it just seems like, yeah, everyone's doing it. So to your point, Tony, I'm not sure how much this really actually tarnishes Saban's legacy if everyone's really doing it to some degree.
Well, and the car thing, there's always been plausible deniability there as well. It's like, yeah, my parents don't have to pay for college, so I have a $500 a month car. Like that's or a lease, which is even cheaper. And so there's plausible deniability there. I think, Kevin, maybe what I would like to see, what I know I would like to see, is just a conversation. Have a sit down conversation with Jimbo and Nick Saban, and as the moderator, Lane Kiffin, and then just have them talk it out and watch Lane Kiffin pour the gasoline like only he can in the SEC.
In the elimination chamber. This is better than any wrestling pay-per-view in the last 5 years. I'm all here for it. It'll be interesting, just to get back to an earlier point, to see what the SEC commissioner is going to be able to do with this. Because we're dealing with two guys with very healthy egos at this point, and Nick Saban has the track record of success to be able to puff his chest up, and then there's Jimbo Fisher. And so it'll be, I'll be very curious to see what happens in the next 24, 48 hours on this. I'm very interested to kind of see what Lane Kiffin says, just because of Lane Kiffin giving zero you-know-whats about that and having a very strong social media game. And honestly, there are going to be people that are going to pull for Lane Kiffin regardless. Lane Kiffin could sit there and have have the old sack with the proverbial dollar sign painted on the side of it, and nobody's going to care because, you know, Lane Kiffin is funny, and Lane Kiffin is not boring, and he's against the, you know, he's against the mold that all these other coaches come out of. So I'll be really interested to see how that all shapes up. But yeah, I mean, to get back to an earlier comment about, let me find it, about the tattoo, about the Tat 5, about saying, are we past all that now? Well, you know, not to be critical of the program I cover, but I'm sure Ohio State's looking at things that they can self-report on right now, because that's just the approach that Ohio State has taken here in recent years in terms of how they handle stuff like that. You know, you've got these two titans with Saban and Fisher who are going to sit there and just, you know, bare knuckle brawl over it. You know, I think it's a really interesting study in how to handle a crisis, whether or not it's a crisis that you created yourself or a crisis that you've been dragged into unwillingly.
The sad thing is for the Tat 5, the fact that they have a title like that is one thing. Two, like, they're really, you don't hear much from them around the program. I mean, Terrell Pryor was banned for what, 5 years from the program, and so they carry that. Like, when was the last time anybody saw DeVere Posey in the WAC? I mean, it's not something that happens really anymore. And in terms of like, when did this shift? This view of players being allowed money, Tom, I think we've talked about this before, where the Jerry Sandusky thing really put a huge divide in what is a real violation of, like, players and things like that, and made a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 changing hands seem like completely minuscule. And then also the sheer amount of money that television has brought in and the increasing contracts, I think those two things just made people look at this differently. And then once you start looking at something differently, then you just keep adding in, like, all of these additional changes are being thrown in like writers, like, yeah, well, we'll just go ahead and cram this new bridge here in in Wichita, and we'll get this here, and then and so you've got some changes like that going on. But I think it stems back from that, because there wasn't much time between the tattoos and Nevin Shapiro at Miami.
Yeah,
the only thing in there between that was Jerry Sandusky.
Right. Yeah. Jim Tressel resigned / got fired / stepped down / whatever on Memorial Day 2011. And then the Sandusky story kind of broke where, like, Paterno was out like October of that year. So, I mean, we're talking, a span of like 5 months. And I think the Sandusky story may have even sort of started to break over the summer, if I remember correctly. I mean, you're talking about, if that story breaks 6 months earlier, the whole Pryor and that whole situation and the Tressel situation is like, boy, there's a little different perspective on all that, because the Nevin Shapiro thing was orders of magnitude, if I remember correctly, bigger in terms of the amount of money we're talking about and the amount of the number of players you're talking about. And by the time that rolled around, that was that might have like started breaking before the Sandusky thing, and then the Sandusky thing was like, oh, this is an actually bad scandal where people are actually being hurt, and it's not just like, well, there's rules and so you have to follow them, so therefore that's bad if you don't. So yeah, no, the timing on that, there is a fascinating alternate history to be written if the Pryor stuff comes out 6 months later, or the Sandusky stuff comes out 6 months earlier, and how differently that would have been perceived. I don't think you have a Sports Illustrated cover story on rigged raffles and whatever else it was, if that all, if the timing was just a little bit different there. But as they say in life, timing is everything.
Super chat from King Bronco Harris, one of our resident Michigan fans. NIL in bad for Midwest, won't spend the same money. There certainly are going to be schools that are not going to have the same opportunities around them that others will. Certainly Ohio State is in a good position. I think that that Michigan could be in a good position. I think that if you sit there and you look at Northwestern, if Northwestern never really got serious about NIL, I mean, I just think that Northwestern could be in a good shape. But it's going to come down to, let's not talk about how it's going to end, because NIL, they're still trying to figure out, get their arms around it. What is it going to look like? Are we going to have collectives? Are we not going to have collectives? Oh, collectives are good because of this. Oh, wait, no, now they're bad. So, I don't know if we know what the end game is going to look like. We know that, we know in SEC country that they're football crazy. I mean, we get that, and we understand. And I heard an interesting thing. I think it was on the radio a few months ago about, you don't necessarily need to be. You don't need to give money to the university now. You can give money to, essentially to your favorite player. You're the you're like a vice president at some small company or whatever, and you've been making, $20,000 donation to your favorite university because you love them, but now you can sit there and your company can go out and sponsor this kid for NIL. So you're doing something more direct with that. So it's, I don't know. I mean, this NIL whole situation, I'm never really going to have a firm grasp on what the hell's going on, but nobody is.
And everybody wants rules except for maybe the agents. And so rules that will eventually happen, and they'll, whatever happens with the Power Five as they break from the NCAA, they won't do it without having an idea of the rules that they want getting put into place and how they're going to operate with this NIL stuff. Another quote from Jimbo that I'll throw out to you, Tom. You coach with people like Bobby Bowden and learn how to do things. You coach with the other people and learn how not to do things. There's a reason I haven't gone back to work for him. That is another, that's a baseball bat to the face. And the implications there, I mean, run wild with them, and everybody can in their own mind. But like he's telling you, Nick Saban, and he's been able to do it without maybe like accusing him of doing anything. Like what specific accusations would Nick Saban have? Is there any libel? Is there any slander here or anything like that? But to say there's a reason I haven't gone back to work for him, like that's pretty pointed.
Yeah, it's interesting to paint Bobby Bowden as the one who did things the right way, because but I mean, Bobby Bowden had some of his own issues over the years. So yeah, that's a very interesting contrast to draw there between those guys. And I think the really interesting part of this to me is, this is what Jimbo Fisher said 12 hours after he had time to compose himself, after he was not necessarily like nuclear hot, white, flaming rage on Wednesday night. Like, what would he have said then? This does feel, there's a little bit of a crossing the Rubicon kind of thing to me here, where it's like, boy, I don't know how much of this you can walk back, because it was very pointed. Saban, you heard coaches talk about, programs running amok in NIL, and boy, things are getting out of control. But to put a specific name on it was like, oh boy, that was a big step. That was a meaningful thing that changes this conversation a lot. And then for now Jimbo to come out and, I mean, really, really directly, just, that wasn't even shots across the bow. That was shots through the bow. That was, I mean, I'm sure Saban is feeling those. And, I was shocked at how direct Jimbo was. I mean, he was only talking for 10 minutes, something like that. And it was like, oh man, that is the one of those, like, where were you then kind of moments. Because you don't see this. You don't see this generally at any kind of a, high level in the sport. Generally it's just sort of Joe Tiller says, Rich Rod is selling snake oil, and it's like, oh boy, that was wild. Can you believe he said that? And Jim Harbaugh says Ryan Day was born on third base, and oh boy, wow, can you believe that? This is like direct accusations of wrongdoing from a couple different people. And I mean, Jimbo can have plausible deniability. That's kind of the game at the high level of the sport, is, well, oh, I didn't know. And, so I never said that. None of our coaching staff said anything to anyone about any of that stuff. Um, it's just, it is crazy that this is happening to this level, that this conversation is happening with this level of vitriol, with this level of direct accusations, with two coaches in the same conference who are, top 5 to 8-ish programs in the country, who have both won national championships. Like, the level of the people involved here and the level of the vitriol involved here, those two things are wild to me.
Yeah, I mean, just the directness, and I mean, again, back to the earlier comments again of calling him basically a false god and everything else. I mean, that's much more than we're going to hang 100 on you, or we had a gentleman's agreement not to do this. I mean, this is. I mean, this is better than a lot of stuff that I've seen in terms of like the political world of congressional hearings. I mean, this is next level, just because these guys know each other on such a strong level, and I think that just adds more credence to it because of the fact of it's not just some random witness coming up and you getting into a little dust up to score political points. There were a lot of political points that were trying to be scored here on both sides of this argument, but this certainly has there's a lot of feeling behind this. This is not just gussied up for the cameras.
Well, you say political. I'll go a less scuzzy version of that, and it's like this is like Breaking Bad. This is Better Call Saul. This is some tremendous drama. And when it was Mike Rodak from AL.com, I believe. Let me make sure. Yeah, AL.com, who was, I think he was the first person to tweet the statements last night, and then immediately everybody jumped on it, and even myself, I'm thinking, is this real? And so I was like, who is Mike Rodak, and what is the context? Was he joking? Let me see this thread. Is this just some make believe stuff? And I know I wasn't alone in that. And like, is this real? I saw other people like, what did he really say? Let's give me the quotes. And then later on, you see the quotes, and it's like, whoa. And then you're like, yeah, that's the quotes, but there's no video. And then the video is there. You're like, all right, this is real. This is legitimately happening.
Blink twice if you're being held hostage.
Tony, I have one word for you: deep fake. I'm just saying, think about it. I'm just saying, think about it.
You know what? If I was duped, then so was Jimbo. And you know what? If we can create this every single day. Like, you can deep fake anything, any coach saying anything. You could deep fake Jim Harbaugh with a personality. You can do anything with CGI these days, and then have some reaction to it. You mentioned, Tom, that Jimbo Fisher waited 12 hours to say anything and composed himself. He sat down and he was angry. You could see it on his face. Like, I don't think his face has any less anger than it did when he first heard about this, because he got down. He was ready to go. Like, he was 100 miles an hour. He went from 0 to 60 in 0.2 seconds, and he has been burning up. And I was surprised, frankly, that he was like 7 minutes late for this press conference.
I was wondering about that because it was, I turned it on at 10:59, like, oh boy, here we go. I've got my popcorn ready. And then my popcorn's getting cold. And where's Jimbo and what's going on? And did the feed freeze? And then, okay, no, someone walked in front of it. So no, it didn't freeze. Okay, where is he? But yeah, he was, I mean, you said he was going 1,000,000 miles an hour. I feel like people who have not watched Jimbo press conferences before don't realize, like, that's just his normal voice. That's just how he talks. And he talks that way whether he's furious, or he talks that way whether he's talking about the second string offensive line and who might be in the running for the second string left guard job. And so that's a little bit of that's just Jimbo. But he came loaded for bear. That was sit down and just, is he going to ease it? Is he going to ease into the pool? It's like, oh no, he is going in head first, and he's got an anvil with him. And oh man, he is going in fast. And he, like I said, what was that press conference? 10 minutes? It was 10 minutes, and it was like 8 of the most remarkable answers I've heard in the last 5 years in 10 minutes. Like, I can't keep up with this. How many different directions is this going to go in remarkable ways? And the answer was all of them.
This one, Barry Marcellus Wallace from Pulp Fiction. He went medieval. He went medieval on somebody's you know what.
It was like you go see your favorite band, and we're not gonna give you the new material. We're just gonna give you the greatest hits, the ones you're here to see, and then boom, get in and get out and be done with it. And it will live on forever. And hopefully, hopefully it will be overshadowed soon by somebody else. And now I didn't want to put this out on Twitter because of the blowback that I would have gotten. But is Alabama Texas A&M the best rivalry in college football right now?
It's I don't know if it's the best rivalry in college football, but it might be the game I'm most interested to see this year. I mean, boy, the pregame handshake. Oh boy, the postgame handshake. Like that was already going to be a good one because Alabama's a lot like Ohio State, where they don't lose very often. And generally, when they do, things go very, very poorly the next time they meet that team. Whoever beat them, things go very poorly for them the next time they play Alabama. And you've seen that with Ohio State over the years, where either the game after they lose, it's like they lose to Iowa, and they play a pretty good Michigan State team that next week, and like oh boy, you're going to be picking little bits of Spartan out of the turf here for quite a while because it's 55-3 or whatever it was. That was already going to be must-see TV because of last year's Texas A&M beating Alabama, and the revenge story there. And boy, if Jimbo can do it twice in a row, I mean, there's a lot of parallels with the Ohio State Michigan game there, where it's like, boy, if they can do it twice in a row, that really changes the conversation. And then if if the big bad team that wins the championship every year just comes back and thrashes you, it's like, well, okay, it was just this one fluke year, and then you're kind of back to normal. That was before. Now, like, holy smokes, that is Ohio State Michigan State week this year, October 8th. Mm-hmm. We have an episode of Buckeye Weekly coming out where we talk about when we think that game might be and all the other games. We thought there was a decent chance it was going to end up a big noon kickoff, which would be delightful because I have a feeling that Alabama Texas A&M game will be at least a 3:30 kick on CBS, if not a prime time. I would have to imagine that's going to be the 3:30 CBS game that week. So you get the Buckeye game done, and then
15-minute post game show.
Yeah.
15 minutes.
Ryan, that's the problem.
Ryan, keep your comments brief after this one, please. Maybe we can, if it's over like it was before last year, maybe we can do third quarter interviews or something. But yeah, that is going to be one that's like, oh boy, even if we're doing a live post game show, which we undoubtedly will be, oh boy, I'm going to have that one on because I don't want to miss that one.
I would hope every now and again CBS does like a double header, where they'll have a 3:30 and they'll have an 8 or whatever. You've also got Auburn, Georgia that weekend. Maybe that could be a 3:30, and then the Alabama, Texas A&M could be a night game. That way we can watch it in its entirety. But also maybe because we're going to miss the first half of that game doing post game at the very least. And that may be the only part of the game that is entertaining. So, will we miss anything? And if it's good, then we'll still be able to watch like most of the second half, the good parts. So it is good. I would still rather watch it in its entirety for all of the, as you say, Tom, the pregame handshake, the whatever happens that week. And we'll that'll be some fun press conferences to watch as well. And how like you guys, Kevin, like how the SID at whatever school, if there's a controversial thing going on, they'll be like, don't ask about this, or tell the players like, don't ask about this. Like, how do you be like, and please, while you're asking Coach Saban questions, please do not ask him about Texas A&M.
Period. Well, we know up in Michigan State we'll be well fed with our one meal ticket that we're given for like one brat or whatever, and those TVs are never. I mean, they do have that one area where they have multiple TVs on, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all that shapes up. But I do like the idea of the doubleheader. Put the UGA game on at 3:30. Put the Bama game on in the night section. That might be a trip of where we have to stay up in East Lansing or that area on Saturday night as well, just for the fact of, yes, we could have satellite radio in the car and be able to listen to the broadcast, but that's just not the same. And that's just a tough drive back from East Lansing anyway.
Scoop eats from a little East Lansing place that called B-Dubs, something like that.
One thing that we haven't talked about yet that I did think is sort of important context for people in all of this on the Saban side of things was, the way he framed his comments on Wednesday night was basically, this is what's happening. They need to get this, we can't compete with this the way it is right now. They either need to get this cleaned up or we need to change the way we're doing business, was essentially the framing of his comments. Like, you can solve this problem and get this stuff under control, or we can play the game this way, and like, you just let me know how you want to do it. And if you have any questions as to whether that was in fact the way he was framing it, go back about 10 years to the spread revolution around college football and the hurry up offenses around college football, and how those were changing the game. And this is 2012, 2013, when Alabama was still kind of, had the big tough defense and the slow, kind of grind it out, run the ball offense. And they weren't running the hurry up, and they weren't really running the spread. They were a little bit old school, that's where you get those 9-6 kind of games, and they win the national title 21-0 with 5 field goals and 1 touchdown, and LSU not crossing midfield. And you had the teams sort of bring that spread in and bring the up-tempo thing in. And there was a very famous quote from Saban where he says, "Is this what we want college football to be?" And it was essentially, he at the time was framing it as a player safety thing, with there's too many plays and there's not enough time to get these guys off the field, and guys are playing tired, and you're running the risk of injuries and all that kind of stuff. And the NCAA didn't really change anything about that, and the conferences didn't change anything about that. So Nick Saban kind of shrugged his shoulders and went, okay. And look what Alabama's running now. They're running, they'll run tempo, they'll spread you out, they're a lot more pass happy. It's not just the 1980s New York Giants run the ball and play defense kind of Bill Parcells offense. It's like, okay, if that's how you want to play it, that's fine. I can win that way too. This whole thing felt to me like Nick Saban saying, like, if you want us to get together a collective for this amount of, you want us to get together a collective and just outbid you, like, that's fine. We also have money here, and we can do that if you want to. I would prefer not to do it that way, but like, whatever, man. If you want to play that way, that's fine. And I think the end result there is like, yeah, Texas A&M, you've got oil money, and that's great and all, but we also have, if we throw money together, then you're just going to have sort of the same status quo. Then it's just, you can, if Nick Saban needs a $30 million collective, like, okay, I'm sure there's $30 million somewhere in the state of Alabama that they can get together, and then ta-da, they'll have money. And then what is Texas A&M going to sell? I think that was sort of the subtext of a lot of this conversation from Saban's perspective. And, I think that's probably worth, in addition to he was talking to boosters about it, like, there was a reason he was saying this in front of boosters. There is a reason I think he framed it in that way as well.
If you're going to get $500,000, just throwing out a random amount, $500,000 and the development at Alabama, or $500,000 and the maybe development at A&M. I'm not going to sit there and say that A&M hasn't put players in the league. I'm not going to say that players haven't thrived under Jimbo Fisher, but Alabama certainly has a proven track record with a lot of things there. And the thing too is, if you go to Alabama, a lot of players end up churning out of there, after a year or two anyway. You can go back in and renegotiate your contracts at that point. So I don't know if you want to sit there and turn Alabama into a fully operational battle station in terms of NIL, because, and again, I'm not being naive to say that there haven't been certain allegations out there that, the certain suit store in Tuscaloosa or whatever, or certain auto dealership in Tuscaloosa hasn't been doing this, that, or the other. But, if Alabama decides to really open the nozzle on this, it could be interesting.
So I'm looking at Alabama's main exports. We talk about the oil money in Texas. Do you guys know let's go with like the 4 main exports from the state of Alabama? I'll give you the top one, unless anybody wants to take a crack.
Scabies?
And no, I was thinking like turtle soup. Like, no. It is transportation equipment, and that stuff is no joke. Like trains.
Zeppelins?
Rockets? They have rockets down there. They have, like, Huntsville's a big rocket city,
Mm,
right?
right, that's true. I seems strange to label that transportation equipment, though. I mean, rockets is pretty cool in itself, but if you want to put it all together, yeah, we've got rockets and we have wagons. Transportation stuff. Also, the number two is chemicals, which that's big pharma. You want big pharma involved? I don't think you do. Number three, paper. We already know Alabama's been pushing paper for years. That's that's pretty much what has built the program.
Ironically, the way you avoid trouble is you don't put anything down on paper. There's some irony there.
Four is minerals and ores, and five is primary metals.
Ores, as in Tom.
Yes.
Minerals
there is a Tom Moore vocational school in Alabama. That is a true fact.
What's the vocation?
Being Tom Moore. That's where you learn to be Tom Moore.
Podcasting.
An avocation. Podcasting.
What other vocation is there?
Wearing New York Mets shirts on podcasts most of the time.
Being a bad baseball fan.
I saw someone in the comments commenting that I'm finally wearing an Ohio shirt. So there you go.
That was what my comment, was based on that too.
The Ohio Bobcats. There you go. Go Bobcats. And go Sam Wiglusz, former Ohio State wide receiver, just transferred down there. It should be fun. Former Ohio State walk-on Sam Wiglusz is now playing for the Bobcats this fall as a grad transfer. There you go. There's your MAG
update. Good. Anything else? I think we've gone for about an hour now, have we?
We have.
Okay.
I mean, I've been marking comments, but we kind of have talked around everything. I mean, we can kind of go through these quickly. Here's the comment about Tom's shirt. So I had that saved.
Asked and answered.
There you go. Earlier point about the self-reporting over, tattoos. So we kind of talked about that one. Question from Jay. Here's one from Willie. What do you guys think about no divisions? The USC stooge was going nuts about it to Mark last night. He all but said USC now will be in the playoffs or New Year's Day Bowl because of it.
I went through, and I'm going to write about this. I like the no divisions thing. I went through and see if I can find it here. To see what the Big Ten championship games would have been without divisions. And the good news is Michigan would have made it twice before they finally made it last year. So look at them. Good job, guys. I think the thing that I really like is the fact that if there are no divisions, Ohio State and Michigan would have played in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game last year.
Oh boy, it was that would have been the first Ohio State Michigan, would it? Because they would have played in 16, right?
They would have played in 18 as well. They would have played in just 18. 16 would have been Ohio State and Penn State.
Okay, yeah. So 2018. So that would have been. Oh man, can you imagine the week after 62-39, then going to Indianapolis for a rematch? See, Kevin's not allowed to talk about this because Kevin's going to be talking about this on the Morning Scoop tomorrow. So I'll just share my thoughts here. I think you've got a lot of positives here because you've got, the Big Ten West has never won the Big Ten championship game since the conference went from leaders and legends to East-West. So you've never had a Big Ten West team win under the current setup, which is like, okay, so there's probably, a little bit of a gap in terms of talent there. You have a similar situation with with the SEC, where the West team wins most years. The ACC, it's generally Clemson, and they beat whoever comes out of the crappy Coastal Division. There's a lot of those leagues where you have that. The downside is you do get rematches now. You're much more likely to get rematches now than under the current system. I don't know that that's a terrible thing, but it's, part of it's also going to be determined by how they sort the divisions out, or how they sort the scheduling out if you go past divisions. Are they going to go with three pods of, if you have 14 teams, you can have a pod of 4 people where you're playing the other 3 teams in that pod every year, who are kind of your protected rivals. And, is that Michigan and Penn State and Michigan State for Ohio State, or is that, someone else? But, you have your 3 teams that you play every year, and then you play the other teams in the other pod, 5 of them one year and 5 of them the next year. So you could play every other team in your conference every other year, which would be great. And that's just with an 8-team schedule. You could even do a 9-team schedule and do even more than that. But I mean, that's great because it's stupid to have teams in your conference who you're not playing. There are SEC teams that, the way the SEC does it, they have an 8-game conference schedule. You play the 6 other teams in your division, plus you have one protected cross-division rival. So then you only have one game that rotates between the other 6 teams in the other division. So you go to the other team, a team in the other division, you go to their stadium once every 12 years. That's stupid. Like, that's
It's
real
dumb.
dumb. So there's no, at that point, you're not really in a conference with someone. You just happen to, you happen to be near each other in the standings on on whatever website. I was going to say in the newspaper, but it's not 1994 anymore. So in the standings on whatever website you're looking at the college football standings on. So I like that. The rematch thing is not great. I'm not sure how people would feel about Ohio State versus Michigan 2 weeks in a row. Like, that's something that sounds cool, but does that take away a little bit from the first Ohio State Michigan game if the second one is just okay, and and now you have to do it again? So that's not ideal, but I think there's an awful lot that is in favor of it. And I mean, I don't know if you guys saw the Pac-12. As soon as the NCAA approved this move yesterday, the Pac-12 immediately was like, nope, no divisions.
No take backs.
Right now. Yeah, it was just like boom, boom. Like, if you're trying to click a stopwatch real quick twice between, click, you see how fast you could click the stopwatch. That was the Pac-12 issuing the, no more divisions. Okay, good, bye, good. So now the Pac-12 championship game could be Utah versus USC or Oregon versus Washington. 2 teams in the same division could potentially play again. So we'll have to see how the Big Ten sorts that out. They have not announced yet how they're gonna handle that.
I like it. I don't think it takes away from Ohio State, Michigan, or rematches, in that one of those teams is likely fighting for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. So, like, it means something, and it's not something where they both sealed their spots and they're going to bench players, and I don't think that will ever happen. I always chuckle at that argument. So 5 times without divisions, like 5 times the same conference championship game would have played. So basically, like 2011 with divisions, it was Michigan State and Wisconsin. Without divisions, it would have been Michigan State and Wisconsin. So that has happened like 5 times where those teams, but 6 times where it would have been new teams, different teams. And also keep in mind, like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, always having to play teams in the East. Like, if you start giving them some West teams to play, then their possibilities raise. Well, maybe not Michigan, or maybe not Penn State, and actually maybe not Ohio State, because they play Iowa and Purdue a little more often. So it's. I also thought initially Tom was drinking some Jack Daniels as well, and not even
being
one
an
in the
Animal
afternoon.
House like that. Him and
Yeah.
Blutarski.
I'm not nearly that exciting. Sorry to disappoint you. It's tea, and it's unsweetened tea. I'm not even excited
Oh,
enough.
wow.
And you know what? I mean, really, this is really an SEC focused show, so I apologize. It should have been sweet tea. That's on me. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan this out well.
And I should be drinking.
Fortunately,
I'd be drinking a Coke, but what flavor? Because everything down
Yes.
there is a Coke.
drinking a Mountain Dew Coke.
I will save my comments for Morning Scoop, since I've been told that that's what I'm talking about. But I'm looking forward to it because I have a lot of opinions about that. But one thing is, are you telling me we're not going to, if this happens and the Big Ten goes to that I'm not going to be promised either Rutgers or Maryland on a yearly basis? Because then if you don't have divisions, you have to change up your schedules. There's no point of sitting there doing away with the divisions in terms of what it means for the conference, for who's going to be representing the league in the championship game, and then not change things up. So as much as I complain about going to Maryland or Rutgers, I'm not so sure I'm that much more excited about going to West Lafayette and Champaign or wherever.
Well, and the way it's likely to happen, and you can sort of read some tea leaves here, because the tie with the drink. Okay, so if you want to kind of read some tea leaves here, there was a footballschedules.com, FEschedules.com pulled the 2023 Big Ten schedule down. So I think that there's a decent possibility that this is something that might not go into effect this year, but could go into effect next year. for 2023. And the way they would likely do it is have pods. Oh yeah, AZ King with a great point. All these people watching and only 52 likes. Everyone hit the thumbs up button, please. Thank you very
It's
much.
free. It's
I
free.
always forget to mention that. Please do that. That will help us. Thank you. You're likely to have a pod of like say three other teams you're with. And if you start with, we are probably going to do this exercise at some point on the future Buckeye Weekly show where Tony and I try and figure out who goes where. But when you start doing this, if you were an Ohio State fan, are likely going to start with Ohio State and go, okay, Ohio State's going to be in with Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State. Okay, good. Now let's figure out who else is in these different pods. And the problem you run into is, okay, Rutgers is still in the league. Who is Rutgers going to want to have in their pod? They're going to want to have Maryland, because they came in together and that's sort of like a sort of rivalry. They play last week of the season, whatever. They're going to want Penn State because Penn State fans fill that stadium every time they come. And then, they're going to want Ohio State maybe. They're not going to get everything they want, but Maryland's also going to want Penn State. So, okay, now Penn State has Maryland and Rutgers in their pod. Then that means they either don't have Ohio State or they don't have Michigan. So you very clearly, it's not quite that easy to just sort of go, okay, well, here's these teams and it'll all work out. Because I don't think Rutgers would be super happy if their pod was Maryland and then a couple of other leftovers. Like you get Maryland and Illinois and Purdue every year. Good luck. Have fun. That would not be a terrible thing from Greg Schiano's perspective in terms of those are more winnable games. You
That's
don't have
exactly the
you don't
point.
start every season with 4 auto losses on your schedule, but they probably also, from a butts in the seats at SHI Stadium perspective, would also like to have Penn State in there. And, their fans, even when they're playing Ohio State, will chant something unkind about Penn State. Like they view Penn State as a rival, even if Penn State doesn't view them as anything. So we'll have to go through that whole process and figure that out. But yes, it is likely to change quite a bit how that schedule looks in future seasons if they do go to that pod model instead of divisions.
Jordan Kapler with the super chat. If I'm Big Ten commissioner, I'm going to shuffle the schedule so Tom has to be in Champaign in November and also on the Iowa sidelines directly behind Brian Ferentz so he can witness the offensive genius.
The last time I was in Iowa City, I saw Brian Ferentz hang 55 points on a team. So, maybe that's all it takes is me being there. My proximity to Brian Ferentz overwhelms his, punt-based inclinations otherwise in times when I'm not there.
Maybe it was your presence that made Ohio State forget that there were tight ends on the field.
Yeah, Tom, you can't take credit when you should actually be receiving blame, or maybe you can. Maybe you have some positive aspects to you and you have a bunch of negative aspects to you. And it just depends on the relation and the position that people have around you. But yeah,
that's part of the Tom Moore Vocational School.
Yes, exactly. Positives and negatives, and plenty of charging. Don't forget about that. Tuition is not cheap anymore. And no, there are no scholarships because Tom needs his money. So I do think, Tom, you need to experience Illinois in November. There's nothing like it.
It is the only Big Ten school I've never seen a game at. We were scheduled to go there in 2020, and then COVID happened, and they canceled that game.
I made it there. I was there. I was already in Champaign, and they canceled the game because I was working for another entity at the time and made the decision I'm going out early because I just don't like racing to a place. And we were pulling into Champaign, and we got the text message that the game was in jeopardy. And then we were in the hotel room and got the message that the game was off. And we're like, well, now what? I'm like, well, I'm on the hook for the room. So we had a delicious dinner in an outdoor pod somewhere in cold Champaign and then drove back.
It's just the worst place in the world, honestly. Even Rutgers has big, terrible sandwiches, Maryland has good food.
Yeah, Taylor ham. We got Kevin and Tony eating Taylor ham.
God, those are so good.
Those are fantastic. The Are You Hungry sandwich was, be sure to look up our Scoop Eats on that. As I really have the gift of hindsight on there, it was just unremarkable. Everything kind of tasted the same. And what they considered to be steak, which were a bad cousin of steakums, just not very good.
No, we should have definitely done the video from the bagel place. The 2023 schedule, I'll just let they reshuffled the 2022 schedule in January.
Mhm.
And so things got changed. They at that time said the 2023 schedule will have some adjustments as well, and we'll discuss those at a later time. So the schedule that you may be seeing for 2023 Big Ten schedule, don't book your hotels based on it. Not that you can book hotels at this point, but that's all going to change. And I won't be shocked when you see how quickly the Pac-12 moved on this. I
Mhm.
won't be shocked if the Big Ten has divisions eliminated by next year. I think we're still going to have them this year, but if we don't, I'm okay with that as well.
Coaches would be up in arms. I mean, because they've already started doing their prep, and again, you have crossover film of everybody, so it's not like who is this Wisconsin team you speak of that
But
nobody's
you
gonna
can
know
still play
what's.
the same teams.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
I mean, I
and
think you could change a lot of stuff up though too. I mean, I think if you're going to move into pods, you need to get there. I mean, you have to sit. You have to. I mean, there's no reason to dilly dally on that.
well, and one thing that I think is worth keeping in mind in terms of this whole conversation is if you get rid of the divisional lineup for the Big Ten championship game, you open up the opportunity, like we talked about, of an Ohio State versus Michigan Big Ten championship game. One of the reasons they went to legends and leaders during that great moment in conference history was they weren't going to do a split geographical thing, because one of the advantages was they got an extra $1 million a year back then. And then this is way back in 2000 and this started in 2011, so it was probably more like 2011. So that would have been, I mean, this is when TV money was not nearly as explosive growth as it has been the last decade or so. But they got an extra $1 million a year just for the possibility of Ohio State and Michigan playing in the Big Ten championship game under the old setup. So you can only imagine how many extra $1 million they might get now per year for the opportunity to have Ohio State and Michigan in face off again in the Big Ten championship game. And I mean, Ohio State and Penn State, like those are not the same intensity of rivalry or anything, but those are two big brand names. There aren't that many big brands on the west side of the conference, so it's like Michigan is like, hey, that's a pretty big name, and then they're playing Iowa. Ohio State playing Northwestern. Like there's just a lot of like on the west side of the conference in terms of like TV eyeballs and brand names. So it will ultimately make a pretty decent difference in terms of what that TV contract is probably worth moving forward. It's already going to be a pretty big number. It will only make it bigger to have those games as possibilities. And that TV contract is getting, I mean, they're doing those negotiations right now. That TV contract goes into effect, I believe, next year. So that would probably be a very logical time for them to start doing that to help make it more worthwhile for their corporate champions at Fox and wherever else.
I don't want to miss
And
out on this question here, Tony. I assume it's Tony, not for either of us. Which campus has the best ketchup, though?
any campus with Whataburger,
Mm-hmm.
because they have the spicy ketchup, and I think we would all agree with that.
Yes, TCU was our best catch-up trip, I would say, so far. That's the only that is literally the only catch-up trip I remember. So I guess TCU wins so far.
I remember them all.
I was going to say I would have figured Tony more of like a Red Gold man, not Hunt's or Heinz. He just likes that RC Cola of ketchups, Red Gold.
That's
Now,
the
now
most
Tony
hurtful thing you've ever said to me.
now Tony doesn't want Kevin to talk anymore on the show either.
Well, maybe I ended it. Maybe I ended the show so we can all get about our lives.
I saw
Sort of like what Saban and Fisher need to do.
Yes. One quick thing, SS Craddock saying never lease a car. The players that are getting cars right now, those are all leases. That's why I said a lease. Like they're just 1 year leases or 3 year leases or whatever. It's not like they're buying cars outright or being given cars. It's just leases. That's why I mentioned the lease. Anything else still in the queue there, Kevin?
We kind of hit everything. We've had, a high of we got close to 300 people on the stream. We've touched upon pretty much everything.
All right. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for joining us. We had to do it. Kevin and Tom hit me with a text. Hey, we have to do this. And so I'm like, okay, I guess. I'll do it, and I guess we'll try to figure out something to talk about. And Jimbo makes it easy for everybody. So that was awesome today. I guess we'll talk to you guys. The three of us will be back tomorrow, depending on what Nick Saban says, and then on Saturday, depending on what Jimbo says. And really, this is just gonna be a daily reaction to Jimbo. You know how like The Walking Dead has their post shows and everything on AMC. Like we're just gonna do a lot of Jimbo and Nick Saban stuff now from now on, and I guess that's okay. And then we can try to talk about Ohio State somewhere in the middle there. Whatever, it'll work out. So that will do it for this show. Thank you guys for chatting. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing. That way you knew we were here, and we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.